record this for. All right, so chapter 2, we're going to start looking at more of the specific data, like analyzing our data, okay? So that's called our descriptive statistics, and then we'll be able to make inferences about it, okay? So 2.1, we're going to look at frequency distributions and their graphs. So we're going to learn that there's many ways to organize and describe a data set. Important characteristics to look for when organizing and describing a data set are its center and its variability or spread and its shape. And we're going to talk about that in 2.3. The center part is stuff you guys actually already know, mean, median. Okay. So what we're going to look at today is a frequency distribution. And this is a table that shows classes or intervals of data entries with a count of the number of entries in each class. So a table that shows classes or intervals of data entries with a count of the number of entries in each class. And then there's an example of a frequency distribution. Okay, so it shows you the different classes, and then it shows you your frequency. So here, first thing we're going to talk about is the number of classes. So how many rows do we have? Anyone? How many rows in our table? 6. So there's 6 classes. The number of classes will always be given to you either from looking at the table or in the setup of the problem. Okay. So then our guidelines are our steps for creating. We're going to kind of go back and forth so we can talk about these different things. So the first one is we're going to decide the number of classes. Okay. And I'm abbreviating some of this so we don't have to write as much. And this should always be between 5 and 20. You don't want anything less than 5 and you don't want more than 20 because it makes it hard to get accurate information. Okay. And like I said, this will usually be given. Because I would like to be able to easily tell what each of you guys are doing versus you creating things on your own. Okay, so then our second step is to find the class width. Okay. And we do this by finding the range. And how do we find the range of a set of data? Anybody remember? How do we find the range? Okay.
Add all the numbers and then divide it by how many there are.
That's going to be our average or our mean. Range is going to be the maximum number minus the minimum number. Okay. And then we're going to divide by the number of classes. Okay. And then the key thing with this to make everything fit in your table is you're always going to round up. Okay, so even if you divide and you get 6.1, you're still going to round up to 7. Okay? It's just how it will always be. So then you're going to find your class limits. Okay. And the way we do this is we use the minimum. As the first class. Lower limit. Then add the class width to find the next lower limit. And then we're just going to fill in the upper limits. So if we look at our example, what's our minimum? What's our first lower class limit? I just circled it. What number did I circle? 1. So that's our minimum. Okay. And then we can find our class width. You're going to see this on your homework, which is why we're going over it, by subtracting the 2 lower limits. Okay, so 6 minus 1 is 5. And if you notice, from every lower limit, they all differ by 5. 6 plus 5 is 11. 11 plus 5 is 16. 16 plus 5 is 21, and so on. And it will also be that way with your upper limits. Okay, 5 to 10 is adding 5, plus 5 is 15, and so on. Okay, it'll always be like that. Okay. Questions with that? Okay. Key thing with your class limits, there should be no overlapping. There should be no overlapping. If a class overlaps, you don't know where to put it when you're doing your tally, which is our 4th step. Make a tally. For each data entry. In the row of the appropriate class. And then step 5, count your tallies to find your frequency. Okay, and then something to note is that the sum of the frequencies should be equal to the number of data entries. Okay, if it's not, you skipped a number. Okay, and you're gonna have to start over, or at least retally. Okay, so we're gonna work on making our frequency distribution. I want to get through this second page, okay? As long as we can get through this, we'll be good. So we're going to just start off with this table at the bottom, and we'll come back and get those definitions as we get to that column. Okay, so starting with the class, we have our data set, lists the prices in dollars of 30 portable GPS navigators, construct a frequency distribution that has 7 classes, and identify any patterns. Okay, so how many classes do we have? It tells us 7. Okay, so we need that to find our class width. And then we want to find our minimum and our maximum. So what's our smallest number in this list of prices? 65. That's our min. And then what's our max? 340. Good. Okay, so to find our class width, I'm going to squeeze this in here in between the data and the table. We're going to take 340 minus 65, so max minus min, and divide by what? By 7, the number of classes. All right. So if we do that, anybody know what we get? Anybody? Alex, do you have a calculator? Find it for us. Put you on the spot. Perfect. 39.28. But what was our rule? Round up. So our class width would become 40. Okay, so for our class, we start with our minimum, which is 65. And then we're going to find the next lower limit. So we're going to go to the second row, and we're going to add 40 to find that new number. So what's 65 plus 40? 105. And then add 40 again. We get 145, 185, 225, 265, 305. And those are called your lower limits. And now we're going to fill in our upper limits. So remember, there's no overlap. So this first one's going to go from 65. So what's going to be our largest number that could be in this class? 104. Good job. Okay. And then you have 2 ways you can do this now. You can either add 40 to that, or you can just keep subtracting 1. So this is going to be 144, 184, 224, 264, 304. Now what would the last one be? What are you going to have to do? Nope. 344. You're still going to do that class width. And the key thing is you want to make sure that your maximum fits in that last row. Does it? Yes. Okay. Now we're going to find our frequency by tallying. So we're going to start, and then I'm going to let you guys kind of do this on your own. Okay. So if you tally, 128 is going to go in your second row. And then cross it off so you know you've done it. 100 goes in the first. 180 in the third. 150 in the third. And keep going. Okay, so I want you guys to work on that. Okay, and then count them up. So we have 6, 10, 7, 4, 2, 1, 1. And then what should we make sure all those add up to be? How many total data entries did we have? 30. So 30 total data entries. So if you add all that up, you'll get 30. Questions there? This here, I think on yours should be like the summation of F. For some reason it didn't copy over. Okay, so that E just means summation, you're adding everything up. F means frequency.
Shouldn't the 7 be a 6?
Well, yeah, it should. Thank you. Okay, so now we have midpoint. So I'm going to slide this up. So our midpoint of a class is the sum of the lower and upper limit divided by 2. Okay, and then we have a shortcut. Find the first midpoint. And then what could we do to find the second midpoint? Any ideas? What do we know about each of those classes? How far apart are they? 40. So then add the class width. Okay, so sliding back to our table, our first midpoint, we're going to do 65 plus 104, then divide by 2, which is going to give us 84.5. So 84.5 is our first midpoint, and then work your way down. So 84.5 plus 40 gives us 124.5. Add 40 again, 164.5, 204.5, 244.5, 284.5, and 324.5. Okay, these midpoints are going to be used for certain graphs, okay, which we'll talk about probably later. Okay, relative frequency is the portion of the data that falls in each class. Okay, so our relative frequency, so RF is what I'm going to use for abbreviating it, is going to equal the frequency divided by the sample size. Okay, so the number of total data entries. We abbreviate that as F over N. So the frequency divided by the sample size. Okay, and these are going to be giving you decimals. Okay. So we're going to take 6 divided by what was our sample size? 30, which gives us 0.2. Okay. If you keep that up, keep doing it, you would have 0.33, 0.2, 0.13, 0.07, 0.03, and 0.03. Okay, if you add all of those up, you should get 1. Okay, those of you in building, go eat lunch. Those of you online, let's finish this page up real quick, okay? Okay, so our last idea is cumulative frequency. Okay, and this is the sum of the frequencies from the previous class. The sum of the frequencies from the previous class. Okay, so if we go back to our table, the cumulative frequency would be just our first one, so 6. To find the next, we're going to add row 2 to row 1. So 6 plus 10 is 16. And then keep adding in. So now we're going to add in the 6, which gives us 22. 22 plus 4 is 26. 26 plus 2 is 28. Plus 1 is 29. And 1 again is 30. This number should always match your total frequency. Okay, it should always show your sample size. Okay, questions with any of that?
I'm confused on like how you got